The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arel. This particular live event and podcast is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. Agile Alliance is a member-supported organization, so if you are a member of, thank you very much, because that actually helps us to provide the resources to be able to bring this call to you. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question is, and this is from Brent, what are the biggest risks that you face when you're setting up an internal coaching group? And Hendrik, would you like to start that off?
I can. So yeah, maybe for the people who don't know me, I work for Ericsson, so a large telecom company, and we had our agile transformation starting in 2008, and one of these things was also this internal coaching group. For us, actually, we did not build an organized internal coaching group. So we had an agile coaches network, but we, on purpose, from a leadership point of view, said they are self-organized and we are not going to interfere with them from a leadership perspective. So we're not managing them, we are not controlling them. They can do whatever they think is right. And that was, I was a manager at that time. I was a bit suspicious about that group, honestly. And I think that's a risk when you are taking such an approach of total self-organization of such a network. And we had quite some intensive debates in the leadership, but I think those debates were also, there was a risk that we would kill it, but there was also the chance that we get through the discussion, and that's actually what happened. And we came to the conclusion, yeah, let them do their job or whatever they think is right. So for us, that approach was a very positive one. But I think at Intel, you had a quite different experience, right? You had a totally different approach.
We had a very similar approach to, let's go ahead and start up a coaching network or set up an internal group of coaches. And in the early days, it was actually quite supported. I think that what we find is in most companies that in the very beginning, when the concepts are novel, that management says, hey, you guys are accomplishing some good things. Let's go ahead and let you guys run and go. But as soon as there's other things that are in the environment that are competing for resources, then you start to get the question, and I'm not sure if you've got this at Ericsson, was, what are your metrics? How do you prove that you're actually making a difference in the environment? Did you have those?
Yeah, well, this coaching network is still self-organized and it's still working in the company. Some of the coaches have left in the meantime and so on. But overall, that approach still somehow works in the background. Then in a second phase, when we rolled out agility over the larger organization, then we had appointed coaches. And there we had exactly the problem that you are mentioning here, that over time, this is a very large organization, and in many places, those coaches, agile coaches, were not really coaches. They were more like process facilitators, or understood there, or were pushed into that kind of role. And then over time, profitability questions come in, and you ask yourself, okay, what are these people actually doing? Facilitating the process, organizing the meetings, calling for the meetings, and so on. And then there were a lot of leaders thinking, what's the added value of these people? And then a lot of these positions were removed.
Interesting. Hey, it looks like Brent, who asked the question, actually, I just enabled your microphone. What do you want to add to this? Can you give us some clarity on your question?
Well, I think y'all got the question. It's pretty clear. I was at Agile Open Northwest a couple weeks ago, and I asked the same question at one of the morning lean coffees, and very closely related to what you were saying about your experience at Intel. The first answer I got back from two people, and it took them no time to get there, was, well, it's the first thing to get cut when the budget goes south. And so they were advising me, don't make it so official that you have a line item in the budget.
Yeah.
Because at that point you are a target for cuts because you don't ship software.
Yeah.
That's interesting, because if you look at from early days, again, when we first set up the coaching networks and the coaches, that wasn't the concern. The concern was more, when we gave numbers about how we were improving efficiency in organizations or improving organizational happiness and all of the other things that were going on. Those answers were okay. Those are great. You should go continue those. But the numbers started to get really big. I mean, we had a community of practice of about 25 to 30,000 people. And so the number of efficiencies that were being improved upon was totaling really big numbers, that when we were going into management meetings, they were going, I doubt your numbers. I doubt that those are existing. So Darius, you joined the call. What's your view on this?
Well, I agree that those organizational impediments would impact people, and we have seen this in action. But let's assume for a moment that they don't exist. There are still inherent risks of who is getting into the job or into the role of the coach and how they understand this. Because you will get people who have different covered goals too, right? They want to get promoted quickly. They want to promote their understanding of Agile, which is really command and control and cover up. And then in this situation, you will be facing the risks of damaging the concepts and the methodology if they don't really care for the common good. So for example, in one of my classes where I do teach how to coach, I asked a question related to, if the coach is really good, your client is the hero and you don't exist. You disappear into oblivion because you just coach someone who achieved the goals they had in mind. And then an individual stood up and said, well, what the heck are you telling us? Why would I want to be a coach? So if you have this type of coaching environment where you have people coming to coaching for reasons other than the design methodology, then you are going to run the risks of really misunderstanding the methodology and creating really resistance for it.
But when you say that, I mean, do you think so? This self-proclamation of I am a coach versus I was hired to do that job. I was interviewed, I was proven to have a set of abilities, and I'm now working with those teams. And one of the things that, and you should know if I met this goal or not, did we hire for empathy and not grandstanders, and making sure that we weren't trying to get superstars that were trying to go steal the light from the fact that we didn't improve, the teams improved.
Yes. Definitely, this is something which would minimize the risks if you hire someone with the coaching credentials, ICF or result coaching, and there are different organizations where you can find those people with the proven track record. But if you do this internally and people in the large corporation just volunteer, you will get command and control drill sergeants who are going to go and spend 90% of their time explaining the role ceremonies, but forgetting about the principles of Scrum and Agile methodology, which is really experimentation and self-organization, right? And in this case, you are going to inflict more damage than you're going to do good.
And I have no disagreement with you that if you get the wrong coach, then yes, that could be a definite impact to an internal coaching group, because then that diminishes the brand of what you're trying to go off and accomplish.
But then there's two aspects to it. It's education. So how well educated are those people in terms of agility and so on? And it's a question of mindset. When you're really having a recruitment around this one, you need to recruit for mindset, which is anyhow very important when you want to build an agile organization. And those are very important aspects when you think about how to put together a coaching group.
Yeah. maybe allow me to put a positive twist on the question. What do you lose if you don't get internal coaches? Because I've seen some organizations that were depending on external coaches, and if you select them wrongly, you get people who are only there for the money and don't at all care for your business or your people, so that can go wrong either way. And I've seen a lot of appreciation if you understand the business and the challenges, what all this is about in the company and the team, then you can help much more with the adoption and the way to do things and really care for the people. If you're part of an organization, you sometimes have access to points like human resources that externals just simply don't get to. So don't forget that you open up a lot of possibilities, and just having them doesn't mean you need to have them full time necessarily. They might be doing another part-time job and still be coaching across teams or things like that. So you can protect the people and their jobs by being a bit smart if you really fear that the budget cuts are hitting you. So don't isolate them from the business is probably the most important thing. If you have an internal group, if they're just there to prove that they do something that is independent of business success, you're already leaving the agile principles anyway. Yeah. So they're not eating their own dog food, probably not smart, but happening. In the organization I'm part of currently now, they're even internally charging money to make it visible how important they are. So that definitely doesn't help because they're not caring for the customer who in the end buys the product. So don't get on that track.
Sure. Salah, I think you raised your hand.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying this conversation. I think, there are I agree with all that's been said so far. I think one of the biggest challenges is to get leadership on board to support the coaching, because most of the time it's that's where it comes from, that the leaders ask, okay, what's the value that the coaches are providing, and if they don't understand what coaching is and what it isn't, then some of the participants have said earlier, everybody becomes a coach in name only, and not really understand what this role entails. So I think it's more about creating a coaching culture and rather than a role itself, because if the leader said we need coaches, everybody or most people just get the role or the title without the actual skill set that comes with it.
I fully agree. One thing to add to that, though, one of the things that I noticed with the organization that we had built up at that Fortune 100 company is that we had a diversity of coaches that were good in certain areas, meaning I might be good at being able to teach, executive leadership and leadership skills and other things, aspects of certain methods, but by far I wasn't an expert in everything, and I couldn't be. There's too many methods. And so the value came, at least I think of the central group, came from the fact that if somebody says, hey, I want to be able to do now business canvases, and I could go point to an individual that I knew how to go do it. So it was both establishing a set of coaches, but also a very strong network of skills. Who else has something to add to this?
I think I've got a little info here. So I work at New Relic, and we started a big transformation a couple years ago. And in the kind of we rolled it out with a big launch. We redesigned the whole org, so all the teams sort of recharted and formed, and then we started the new system one day, literally. And we didn't have any internal coaches. And what that led us, well, the path that led us down was that because the transformation is hard and you're kind of working against existing culture and it takes a lot of time to adjust, we saw a lot of backsliding because there were no coaches to mind the day-to-day decisions and to help the teams navigate the new system. And so it took us about 2 years to figure out that we needed somebody doing that work. And so now I'm the only person we have doing that work. By getting, when we had kind of no coaches, I was doing some of that work sort of part-time, but it ended up being fairly ineffectual because it was my second, third, or fourth job. So I couldn't devote the time to it that it needed. And I didn't have the buy-in to do that work from a lot of folks. It was very ineffectual. It's frustrating for me. And then the system overall was drifting. Now that I'm in this role officially, I've been able to work with leadership and say, look, here's data, here's what the system is doing right now, let's go fix this together. And so that's been actually super effective. And so having no coaches or part-time coaches, I think, is a difficult position to be in because you just can't get the leverage you need with the leadership to make big changes happen. You can't mind the system and keep it on track.
And would you also say that just because it also was a bonus job for people, that it was hard for them to be focused? It was hard for them to be able to look in and say, can I go divide my time effectively between these 5 roles I might have, including a coach?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's hard for you to justify saying, well, I'm going to go sit with the teams at all the ceremony. Oh gosh, that conflicts with my team's stand-up. Right. And so you run into just like really hilariously simple logistical problems that you cannot resolve because you don't have the charter to do so.
Yes. And, I'll add one other aspect of some of the problems facing. So management is interesting. And I think this is when we talk about coaching organizations, and I think this is something that on coaches, we need to be very aware of, is that when we're not using, and I think Darius, I think you kind of hit on this a little bit, if we're not using the terms that they have top of mind, meaning that if you look at most of the conversations I have at executive management are, our employee retention is awful, our revenue is awful, or our value that's being delivered to our customer is awful. Whatever those problem statements are, to frame what we're doing in coaching to fix those problems, I think go a long way in continuing the support of coaching organizations.
Well, I agree with that, Ray, if I may add to this. And I think the comments which I heard are very wise. And in my judgment, they are leading to a far bigger question here, that we live in the economy and the ecosystem where most of the people are paid for thinking, creativity, problem solving, innovation. And the methodologies which we use or management models are from the previous age of manufacturing, where people say, leave your brain at home, come and do what management set up for you to do, and it will be great. This mindset, someone already pointed out, is not going to survive this. And in this new environment, growth mindset and some other learning is necessary to find out, how do we really help people to think better? How do we enable this, and how do we interact with individuals and teams, right? What are the methodologies? What are the tricks of the trade which you can apply to really adapt quickly, right? If you're a complex adaptive system, you have to learn what the adoption is about. And Scrum is one of those methodologies, but there is tons of material discovered in the last 20 years, which helps you to deal with this and to create the environment in which people will be enticed and engaged to creatively solve the problems. And this is really the role of the coach, right? Because we don't teach this in schools yet.
Yeah, I somewhat agree to what you're saying. I would add one other important thing to it, and that is in our traditionally organized companies, the leaders are extremely important for the company's system. So if the leaders are not on board of such a change, it won't happen. No matter how good coaches you recruit or whatever, the leaders need to be on board, I think.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. This is where the problem is located.
Yeah, but if you say leaders, it's maybe 80% the official appointed hierarchical leaders, But to 20%, it's especially in older organizations, the informal leaders, those guys who've been around for 30, 40 years and just don't do something if they don't like to, and they know all the tricks how to circumvent it. And they can be an extreme threat as well if they feel their position and livelihood is threatened, and they can be extremely influential as well.
Yeah, and then we come back to this what was mentioned before, the ego question. If you are doing your job and you are self-identified with what you are doing, it's all about you, and your whole worthiness and so on depends on what you are doing, and then you become very resistant to any kind of change.
And I think that whole central notion, I think, is where sometimes we get a little bit hung up, and that is, and it's a good place to leave this question. How we position the work that we do, we're not making dependence. We're not trying to make people dependent on our skills in order for them to do their work. We're trying to teach them how to do their work more effectively. And once that is done, then we can be like the Incredible Hulk and put on our bag and go to the next city, which I think is perfectly fine. So we have 87% of the people in the audience saying we need to pivot to the next question. So I'm going to honor that, and we're going to go ahead and close this one and go to the next. So the next one is it's by Theodore, and Theodore basically says that should you have a desired timeline to complete your organizational agile transformation in order to have the highest possibility of success? So I'm not sure if you're in the audience today, but I guess this is the question. Should we say by December 20th, we will be agile as an organization?
I think I love the question. So I find it, on the one side, I find it funny because I thought, okay, a transformation is never over. On the other hand, personally, for myself, I know I need deadlines. I need to get going. I need to work towards something. So my experience with this is, if it's not a timeline, at least you need to build up something like a transformation backlog. So what we, for example, used was a Kanban system, where we noted down everything that we wanted to address running the change. And we pulled from that Kanban. So we rather created a flow of change than setting a concrete deadline. But you need to get going. That's the point, I think.
Absolutely. And having a deadline and other measures of success is essential to get to a target and define the target. But please don't make agility the target. It's just no goal in itself. If you start with, I want to be agile by December 24th, only Father Christmas can make this happen. No other way. So don't do it. Go for, as Ray said, the concerns of the management, the concerns of the business, the concerns of the customer, and use agile methods to improve there.
Hey, Tim, what do you have to add to this?
Actually, I was just going to echo that exact point, that agility is not the target. And in fact, agility is something that helps you achieve other goals. You should be using, you should always start with what are the objectives you need as an organization, and agility is something that helps you get there. You'd only be doing a waterfall transformation if you said, I'm going to predict where I'm going to be at a given time. You need to set a goal, have metrics, and know where you stand against that goal, and use agility to help facilitate that.
So I think I have a slightly different opinion here. So if you're kind of an executive who's buying an agile transformation, if it doesn't have like a box around it that lets you limit the investment, you're never going to buy it. And so I think on the one hand, you do need some kind of date where you can say, we're aiming to hit this target. By that date, we'll have figured out what our new processes look like. We'll have done the training, and we'll shift the system into working in this new way. But you shouldn't, but to line up with what previous speakers have been saying, I don't think you should promise agility then. Because the agile transformation never finishes, right? You're always working on it. You're always working on the system. You're always trying to improve it. And so there is no like end date for the transformation, but I think you need a launch date for the transformation.
And you need to have a deadline for all the actions that you take, I think.
I think that's one of the reasons why I liked, bringing in some of the lean methodology in the space, where lean considers some of the change that you do is, or fixing problems or countermeasures. And every time I do a countermeasure, I might solve that problem, and then I will expose 3 more, and then I have more to work on. And I think that backlog management of knowing that I'm making progress towards fixing, and I'll just pick on the one I've been working on for the last year, which is business people and developers working together daily, which is an agile principle that is non-existent in most businesses that I see, that I know that I'm going to have to take incremental steps. And in those incremental steps, I do believe that a deadline is important to help to get focus to the organization that we're going to make progress in that way. Now, we also have to be conscious that if we go working towards that deadline and it doesn't happen, we don't suddenly start beating people on the head. We just start asking the question of, how fascinating that was that we didn't get there. What do we need to do to correct that?
And again, fail fast. So probably you set an earlier deadline that allows you for more correction in terms of direction and impact, instead of working 2 years and then detecting, actually we didn't do the change we wanted.
Yeah, I fully agree. And just to add one more point to that is that be cautious anytime somebody introduces to you a 5-step approach or a 2-step approach or a 20-step approach to change. When we're changing culture along with methods, because we're combining the two, we're going to have a lot of things that we're going to work on that are going to be outside of the process. We're going to be working on that human side as well.
One thing, sorry.
I wanted to add to what Ray, you were saying, that it is really important role to play by leadership to maintain the focus and the attention. And you can use the deadline or you can use a milestone to achieve just that without the stigma of a metric saying that, if you don't do this, then there will be some consequences. You can have metrics, but they should be invisible to people so that if you are making progress. And if things don't work, then you will reach for something else. But you use this as one of the tools in your toolbox to maintain focus and attention, without which you don't really control the progress.
A good practice that I have been part of is, leaders are, I always call that system shepherds. So they are there to observe what's emerging from the system, from the organization system, as the agile transformation unfolds. And a good practice around that one is to run organizational retrospectives in the leadership team. So to see what's emerging, where are we succeeding, where do we feel that we are not succeeding, and what are we going to do about that?
So I agree with that. Now, Lisa in the background actually asked a question on the side here that says, not just dealing with management, but how do we deal and engage with product management during the agile transformation? Which, as you know, there's 2 different sets of concerns that are being balanced. One's more financial. The other one is just get the delivery date done.
Yeah. We talk. When we started sketching the change actions that we want to take, and we said, we did not say we go agile. We wanted to reduce time to market and become more predictable. Actually, that was the problems we wanted to solve. And then on the journey, finding out how can we solve this, we found agility as a very promising approach. And we very early worked together. We invited our colleagues from product management to this discussion. For example, I remember I organized a workshop of 2-3 days where we were just looking at how actually are we planning and why are all our plans not working out and so on, and what do we do together about that and so on. these 3 days, they were really well invested time, because in those 3 days, we really hit the rock bottom of the problem, and that is that nobody can predict anything. And then the question was, okay, what do we do now? And we found a good solution to that. So invite the guys to the table as early as possible.
I think the one thing that I found in that ritual of and planning in particular, I think for some reason has gotten twisted over the years. Planning is about discovering what we don't know. And that's the reason why we plan. It's not to document everything that we do know. It's to document these things where we go, hey, we don't know that, and we need to go do some work in there to go figure it out. I think what we're most uncomfortable with, and especially product managers are, is really when you have those big, creepy, unknown unknowns, where I don't have an answer for you on this. But if we can put in, some smaller iterations or some, safe to fail experimentation or whatever we can do to find out that information, I think we just need some new processes that help to deal with organizational concerns that we don't have an answer there. But we have a process that we can follow to find that answer and to make people comfortable.
Yeah, I would also add, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to add on the involving product management early, it's as well sharing all results and presenting the results as early as possible in a clear way that they understand what does this mean for the customer, and then get the iterations of idea generation moving. I've seen it in a pretty interesting presentation by the team where the product manager joined, and suddenly they were in a deep discussion what to do in the next sprint, because ideas were just flowing from him, and suddenly understood, hey, those guys want to do the same product I want to do. And if you get that done, then you're really moving things along.
I fully agree with that. Shall we pivot to the next? I'm sorry, do you have something to add?
Just one thing. If you don't align with your product management on the scope negotiation, you're really destroying the true three-legged stool, and you are going to have a lot of trouble. Because if the product management would say, yeah, do this thing agile, but you have to deliver 100% what you promised a year ago by this date, and scope is not going to be negotiable, then you're going to be in the long struggle, which is not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
Scope has to be agreed upon that this is negotiable, and it will be done carefully with all the involvement. But if you don't have this alignment, I think you will do more damage than good.
And to go beyond just alignment, and I think that it was David Hussman who taught us how to do collaborative chartering. I think that we need to really reinforce who owns what decisions, where product management fits in the agile adoption scope. It shouldn't be something that's off on its own. It needs to be a part of. And if it's not a part of, that's one of those impediments that we need to go work, because most of the problems I see happening in agile teams is that we have a product manager who got committed to the work, meaning somebody told that individual that they are responsible for the delivery of the product. And in reality is they're not. It's the team is responsible for the delivery of the product. It's not one person that's going to fail. And they need to really reinforce that. And by the way, if anyone wants to join the conversation at any time, raise your hand, because I would love to be able to have you join in. With that, though, if we don't have any much more on this one, I'm going to pivot to the next question. You guys are also welcome at any time in Slido, since we crowdsource the questions. You can always repitch a controversial question at a future time. So with that, the next question is, this one's interesting because it was coaching a team member and working for a aggressive functional manager who's not a member of the team. And functional manager, that feels very Western to me. I don't know what others think of this one. Anyone want to start that one off?
Yeah, let me try. So aggressive probably comes in two ways. First of all, I don't know. I like the term seagull management: fly in, drop shit, fly out. Those guys who only take an interest if there's a problem, and as they are not really in the, let's say, continual line of things, they very often don't even know what the problem is. And I would recommend refer them to the team. So make them understand that you're part of something, and that they are not the center of the world by exposing them to the entire scope. So bring them in front of the Kanban board or Scrum board or whatever you have. And if they have a real concern, immediately put something on there so that they are sure it's going to be addressed. Because very often they are just unsecure. They think they are forced to change the world, but don't have a single clue how to do this. So probably trying to address their concerns very good. And then there are the others who think, if my team is going agile, if the work around me is going agile, I've got nothing to contribute, so I need to defend my position and make those guys look bad. There again, try to address their concern, ask them for help, get them to do something productive, because then you can get an alliance. And maybe then there's the third group, and they simply just don't want to be nice, and that's their character trait. Then, yeah, your organization has a problem if they have a lot of those people.
Interesting. Tim, you have your hand up. I don't think you've ever worked for an aggressive manager before, have you? Tim put his hand down after that. I have nothing to add. How about others?
I've encountered this before in a limited way, but it boiled down to, I think, a misunderstanding of their role in the process. And I think what Jorg was talking about in terms of threat too, they felt threatened because of that lack of clarity and insight to what their true role is. And I think they felt as though they were in competition with the team, so they had to do whatever they had to do to, one up the team. And when we got some clarity to them about what we were asking them to do and what their new role was in a agile transformation, I think that cooled their attempts to really disrail things and upset the team and be aggressive to push their own agenda forward.
Yeah, and aggression is and having done agile adoptions and work in a really multicultural company, sometimes we misinterpret aggression or aggressiveness to maybe just a cultural component. That's a possibility that's there. The other thing is that I always find that when someone's being aggressive, that there is a hidden problem. There's a hidden problem that needs to be exposed, and we need to talk about it. And I've always been the upfront person who would, take a person aside and say, could we have a conversation on that? Because that I'm sensing something here that I don't fully understand, and it would help that if we can bridge this gap, and to be able to understand what the team isn't providing you, and how can we improve the situation.
And maybe there's as well the other perspective to look at that. Sometimes it might be just a defense because the agile coach is aggressive. So I've met more than one agile coach who claims that the entire world has to go agile and it's a religion, and if the managers don't move fast enough, the whole world is going down. So sometimes the problem is on the agile side as well.
Amy, you had something to add as well?
Well, I wanted to stretch the question a little bit. So how do you handle a command and control functional manager, someone who's operated in a command and control way for a very long time? And maybe they're even on the team, but maybe they're mostly so you touched on something about they're worried about their own success, or they're worried about their own credit versus the team's credit, when the team's credit is really, to me, the end goal. So I'm actually asking a coaching question.
I hear you. I'm waiting. I'm yielding back a little bit.
I think that the problem here is that there is not this general answer, because the motivation why people act the way they do, it's such an individual thing. And what is driving people to show a command and control behavior, I don't know whether there is a general answer to this. I think often there is a feeling of, or the need for feeling worthy and a need for being important. For me, this is very often something related to those kind of questions. And then the question is, how can you satisfy those needs while and help those people, showing them that you can satisfy those needs also in an agile way, an agile approach.
And by the way, I've enabled some microphones. Please just dive in on the conversation if you have something.
Yeah, David here. Can I jump in?
Please.
Okay. Yeah, guys, I completely agree with you guys that there's certainly an element of fear from the person being concerned about what their job is. Do they have a job? That sort of stuff. I believe there's an element of status involved. This is what I have been. What does this new agile stuff mean to me in the future? But I'd also like to kind of encourage us to not look at fixing the people. Let's look at the system. And I think this is one of the systemic problems could be that the top of the list is probably MBOs and bonus structures that are driving behaviors. And then the second thing is probably the overall HR practices, right? Review process, their annual appraisal process, and those sort of things. So I think maybe part of the answer or insights to this topic are really looking at the systemic problems. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
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 I just wanted to add. I think one of the things that I found is not. It comes back again to leadership and the environment that the leadership nurtures across the organization. One of the things that I learned from I think one of my colleagues is the idea of congruence from Virginia Setter. The context is very important. So what context are we talking about? If there's this culture of always pushing a lot of pressure, then the aggressiveness will be part of the the behavior that will come from that culture and from that context. So it helps to understand the context.
And what are some of the ways that you actually search out the context?
I mean, there is a lot, right? And I want to echo what the last commenter said around this notion of congruence. And if I am part of the system where this is a routine behavior, then it would be totally not out of context for people to act aggressively and be command and control. At the same time, it may not be appropriate, right? There's a degree of aggressiveness, and I am assuming we are talking about the middle, where getting super aggressive would become an HR issue, and that's a different problem, and we're not talking about that per se.
Right.
My personal experience, my personal experience in the general norm is folks tend to exhibit a behavior because they have been able to get something by exhibiting that behavior, and it's the least cost energy expenditure from their standpoint. In other words, if I could just walk up to a person and demand something to happen, and it happens, why would I spend any more energy in trying to understand my context or build empathy for someone else in the context? And because all of that takes more energy from me, right? So one of the approaches that I personally find is been helpful, or if I were to coach somebody, is to start paying attention to your own body language, because oftentimes the aggressor will demonstrate their actions through stepping into your space, and you would take a step back, or you will make your eye contact, or you will make yourself small. Any of those are indications that they are going to get away by being aggressive. So simple acts as just being present, keeping an open body language, answering the question but not taking on the aggression, lets people know that this is not, that you're not a pushover, right? Because
Yeah, I mean,
it's some, yeah.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
No, I mean, I feel like there are definitely like much larger issues in the organization to be addressed. But in that moment when someone is being aggressive with you or demanding a date, I feel like these are some very simple tricks that you can apply to kind of take the conversation beyond the simple act of aggression. Because if they don't get through aggression something, then they will be forced to spend the energy to hopefully try to understand your viewpoint, or at least listen to you, where you can help them see the other side of the problem.
Right. And I think you bring up a really good point. And one thing I noticed with coaches, especially if you've been a part of an Agile adoption for a while, and you're now describing to somebody new what this adoption was to you, or however, what I find is that sometimes we talk at the wrong level, meaning that if I come to you and say that my life is great and my team is great, but this person that you're talking to is my life sucks, and guess what, my team sucks as well, we talk over one another. You know, how do we bring ourselves to understanding what this other person might in fact be going through?
Right.
And Ellen, I think you had something to add as well?
Oh, no, I just was trying to understand the protocol. I didn't at the moment. Thank you. I wanted to.
No problem.
See if I was making some comments in the panel and I can't see who else is on the call. Yeah.
I apologize. That's one of the limitations of the tool. But now that you're in the conversation, you can actually throw in your comments here with us.
Oh, verbally. Okay. But also I sometimes find it helpful just in terms of a process check to have, make comments supplementing and not interrupting anybody. So that's why I was also making comments in the little written panel.
No, and I greatly appreciate that.
So just let me pose a follow-on question, if I may. Has anyone had any luck with eliminating MBOs and bonuses in the organization?
I'm going to have you repeat that one more time, if you could.
I'm sorry?
Could you repeat it one more time? You broke up a little bit.
Oh, sure. I'm just wondering if anyone has had any luck addressing the systemic issue of bonuses and MBOs. Has anyone had any luck removing them from the organizational behaviors?
I will say I've had partial success, meaning that we've had times when we are looking at those strategic goals, and I was in senior management, so I saw early drafts and version of that. We've had both as a manager and as a coach, being able to influence and saying that's going to drive the wrong behavior, and happened to be in an audience of people that said, yeah, I guess now that I'm thinking about it, that's the case. I was fortunate enough, though, that I was long enough in the company that I had seen other problems that similar goals created in the past. And so I would use that nostalgia component of going, remember when we did that last time? And people went, oh, yeah, that didn't go so well. So that was probably my biggest partial success with doing that.
I got to benefit from a shift in the way that performance was managed and reviewed by virtue of being in a program, a freelancing program within our company, and it focused much differently from the rest of the population on impact that you said you would have during the year. And if you, at the end of the year, met that impact, then you were rewarded for creating that impact. However, the rest of the population was pitted against one another, and it creates all sorts of aberrant behavior that has to be fixed systemically. But one of those solutions is shifting how you measure people.
One other success that I can add to this is that we, at least within our functional group, we changed the way performance reviews were done. Instead of it being the 3 accomplishments that an individual had, and this included managers and how they were rated in the system, they had to have the first thing on their review was what they did. The second thing on their review was what they did for the team, and the third thing on their review is how did they build more of themselves. Who are they mentoring? Who are they coaching out in the environment? And that had a profound effect of getting people from thinking that they were just on their own, and divide and as long as I'm at the top of the list versus I'm not going to look so good if I didn't actually help the team.
I would like to add to this that I did participate in the failed attempt to change that, but I will give you a pointer to a successful attempt, which is Microsoft. Microsoft revamped their structure, and they work with the company which helped them to do this. And they have successes. They are trumpeting the success. There are business cases describing how they move from the curb rating on the bell curve into a different performance evaluation, and most importantly, development of their workforce. How they really implemented the growth mindset in their evaluation system.
And that was a profound way that they actually changed the profitability of the company.
Yes.
I think Lisa actually had one other contrast that she put into the typed questions here, and she was really getting into the question of what do you do with a manager who aggressively doesn't believe that Agile is the better way of work?
Maybe combining this with the previous discussion, I've worked for a manager who was actually pushing Agile very much, and his organization was quite going along, but he became the problem because he himself wasn't following the mindset in the way he thought he was. And that was actually a big push forward for the people in feeling supported when he actually simply acknowledged that, yeah, I have my shortcomings and I'm going to work on this. Please help me. So if you get there, you really, really have to tell the managers who manage to do that they are really, really great, because they're just people as well. So they need that support. And looking from that, try to make them understand what impact they have if they're aggressive, and do it, at least try to do it from a people's point of sight. I wouldn't say personal, because it's hard to get so close to them, but make them understand that you appreciate them as a human being and not just like somebody who has always to be perfect, which is sometimes the challenge. The higher you go up in management hierarchy, people get very, very lonely. So sometimes keep them company.
I think that's interesting, because I'll just share one story as we wrap up today. There was a very senior manager in Israel that I worked with to go implement Agile within their organization. And I remember that we taught them how to use Kanban as a visual indicator for around the organization. He was just really doubtful about everything that we were saying. And we went away after we taught them, and we came back about 4 months later to Israel, and he signals me over. And he brings me into this room that they constructed, which had all of their Kanban boards in it. And it was a beautiful room with, lots of work being shown, big visual indicators. And he was showing me this with such pride that his group had created this thing that made his life easier, because he doesn't have to ask for status reports anymore. And then very out of character for this individual, to say the least, he actually says, and you know what I do when they're not looking? I write these little notes like, great job, on a Post-it note, and I put them on their board, and I don't let them know that I did that. And I thought that was just, one, cute as hell, and two, that was a person who was aggressive, and then eventually, just by seeing the process work, eventually came back around. We are at the top of the hour. Darn it, we're having such great conversations. I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and everyone who is out in the lurker crowd, thank you for being here. This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.